My name is Dr. Isabel Luna, and this isn't the story of how I became one of the top trauma surgeons in the country. It's the story of how the man who destroyed me came crawling back, on a stretcher. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. 10 years ago, I was a woman in love. Blindly, deeply, and stupidly in love. His name was Ryan Carver. Successful, charming, 10 years older than me, and utterly magnetic. When we met, I was just finishing my surgical residency. Long nights, impossible cases, and the kind of pressure that would crush most people. But I thrived under it. And Ryan, he made me feel like I could breathe. He used to wait outside the hospital at midnight with hot soup in a thermos. He knew my scrub size better than I did. He'd rub my feet when I got home. He was perfect. Until he wasn't. After 5 years together, I came home early one night. My flight from a medical conference had been cancelled, and I didn't bother texting him. I wanted to surprise him. What I walked in on was not a surprise. It was a demolition. Our shared apartment, mine technically paid for by years of backbreaking shifts, was glowing with candles, jazz music, and on the living room couch, Ryan was making love to someone else. Not just anyone, my best friend, Nora, who had stood next to me through med school, who helped pick out Ryan's birthday gifts, who once cried to me after her abortion. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. Froze. Ryan had the nerve to look annoyed. "Isabel," he said, pulling on a robe. "We need to talk." Packed one suitcase. Just one. I left everything else, because I couldn't stand the idea of sharing space with a scent of betrayal. What followed wasn't just heartbreak. It was warfare. Ryan didn't just want to move on. He wanted everything. He took me to court for cohabitation assets. Claimed I owed him money for renovations, expenses, emotional labor. He painted me as obsessive, volatile. Said I was mentally unfit after years in the ER. And the worst part, he had help. Nora testified. Together they won. I lost the apartment. I lost most of my savings. I lost my reputation for a while too. But I kept my license. And I kept my hands steady. I left New York. Took a job in a quiet trauma unit in a small city hospital outside of Denver. Nobody knew me there. I didn't correct them when they mispronounced my name. I worked night shifts, ate alone, and bought a tiny house with no memories inside it. I didn't date. Didn't talk about my past. I performed surgeries, saved strangers, built a new life one stitch at a time. Years passed. I rose through the ranks quietly. Never the loudest voice in the room, but always the one who showed up first and left last. I earned respect, not attention, until that night. It was a cold Wednesday in November. I was off duty, curled on my couch with a mystery novel and soup I'd made too salty. My phone rang. "Dr. Luna," the ER receptionist said breathlessly. "We have a critical case incoming. VIP alert. Ambulance en route. ETA 5 minutes. We need trauma-led. Dr. Chang's out." I sighed, already pulling on my jeans. "Be there in 10. I didn't know who it was. Didn't care. Patients were patients. But when I walked into Trauma Bay 2, I stopped breathing. On the stretcher, covered in blood and semi-conscious, was Ryan. Yes, that Ryan. 10 years older, grayer, thinner, but unmistakable. His ID bracelet said Richard Tanner, an alias. But I would know that jawline anywhere. He was mumbling, heart rate unstable, BP plummeting. His face was pale, lips blue. Whatever happened, it was bad. I stood frozen, just like I had the day I walked in on him. Then instinct kicked in. Let's move. I want vitals every 30 seconds, intubation tray ready. Page cardio for a consult. He was going into cardiac shock. I worked like a machine, detached, fast, efficient. Inside I was shaking. But on the surface I was steel. He coded once, then twice. I shocked him back both times. His chart was a mess. He had been in Mexico, apparently, at some offshore wellness center for experimental detox. He came in with what looked like anaphylactic shock combined with heart arrhythmia, likely a reaction to something injected. It was almost too clean. Too convenient. That's when the nurse tapped me on the shoulder. "Dr. Luna," she said quietly. "His wife is here." Wife, course. Nora. I turned to face her, and it was like staring at a ghost from a nightmare. Nora hadn't aged well. Too many fillers. Eyes darting, lips trembling. She wasn't in control, and I could smell it. She didn't recognize me. That hurt more than it should have. He has a DNR, she stammered. In his bag. You can't keep treating him. DNR. Do not resuscitate. A legal order signed and verified would mean I'd have to stop. My breath caught, but I stayed calm. Where is it? She handed me a folded document with shaking hands. I read it carefully. Everything was there. His signature, the date, the notary stamp. Except one thing. His medical power of attorney wasn't Nora. It was still me. Buried in hospital databases, never updated after our split, was the designation. Probably forgotten by both of us. But it was legally binding. I had the final say. And I could tell something else was off. The ink on the DNR was smudged. The signature looked traced. The notary stamp was faded. Forgery. I made a quick call to legal, then turned to Nora. Until this document is validated, I have full discretion. She tried to argue. I ignored her. I walked back into the OR, looked down at Ryan, who had once left me with nothing, and whispered, "Lucky for you, I still know how to save lives." The surgery was brutal. His blood pressure dropped 3 times. His heart stopped once. But I brought him back. 'Cause that's what I do. And not for him. Not for Ryan. I saved him because there was something bigger at play. Something in the pit of my stomach that screamed this wasn't a medical emergency. It was a setup. We worked for hours, and by dawn, he was stabilized in the ICU. Machines beeped in rhythm with a heart that had no business beating. He'd live. For now. I stepped into the locker room to change out of my blood-stained scrubs. The cold tile under my bare feet was grounding, but my mind was racing. How did he end up in my hospital? Under a fake name? Why did Nora try to present a DNR so urgently, without confirming who had the medical power of attorney? And why, after all this time, was I the one legally listed to make decisions? That afternoon I received a call from legal. "Dr. Luna, we reviewed the DNR. It's invalid." Closed my eyes. "It's a forged notary seal," the caller explained. "Whoever submitted it tried to copy an existing format, but the registry number was incorrect, and the seal doesn't match state records." "Understood," I said, trying not to feel the full weight of what that meant. They tried to let him die. On purpose. And if I hadn't shown up, if I hadn't been on call, if any other surgeon had taken the case and accepted the DNR at face value, he'd be dead. Later that night I stood outside the ICU window, watching Ryan breathe through tubes. The man who once humiliated me in front of a courtroom now lay unconscious, kept alive by machines I ordered and hands I trained. He looked smaller now, older, fragile. And then he opened his eyes. Just barely, but enough. I stepped in. His pupils adjusted to the light, then locked onto mine. Confusion first, then disbelief. "Isabel." The voice was dry, cracked, almost a whisper. "You're okay," I said, checking the monitor. "You're in the hospital." You coded twice. I was on call. He looked around, trying to sit up, and winced. "Don't move." There was a long pause. Then hoarse. "I thought you were in Boston." "I left New York after the trial," I said flatly. His eyes shifted again. "You saved me." "I did." "Why?" That stopped me. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one, but because the real answer was too complicated. Over the next few days, Ryan remained in critical condition but slowly stabilized. Nora, on the other hand, was a hurricane of nervous energy. She showed up daily, asked about discharge plans, insurance, and whether there'd be long-term memory damage. But never once did she ask, what actually happened to him? That bothered me. Then came the toxicology report. Ketamine, polyamine, a trace of morphine. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just bad medicine. It was poisoning. Someone had administered a cocktail designed to mimic cardiac arrest while erasing memory and inducing paralysis. I'd seen it once in Colombia, used by cartels to make witnesses forget. Not available legally. Not in the US. And not something that ends up in a bloodstream by accident. I printed the labs and walked to the nurse's station. Do we have his intake file from the wellness clinic? A nurse handed me a manila folder. Inside were brochures. Inner Serenity Healing Center. Tulum, Mexico. Nora had told the receptionist they'd gone for healing. But I now had strong reason to believe it was something else. That evening, I sat in my office long after the sun had gone down. I pulled up Ryan's file, then cross-checked it with old court records. Yes, I still had them. Even after everything, I never deleted them. Some scars you keep. That's when I saw it. Plus, hidden in the financial settlement. Insurance payout beneficiaries. Ryan had taken out a life insurance policy 5 years ago. One that increased in value if death occurred while traveling abroad. And Nora, she was the sole beneficiary. My hands trembled. This wasn't just a toxic reaction. This was attempted murder. I needed evidence. More than just suspicion. So I did something I hadn't done in nearly a decade. I picked up the phone and called a contact from my old life. Tom, I said. It's Isabel Luna. He paused. Wow, been a while. You okay? Not exactly. I need a favor. Quiet one. Tom had been an investigator back in New York private sector. He owed me for saving his daughter's life years ago. I need someone to look into a woman named Nora Whitmore. Possible fraud. Maybe attempted homicide. I'll pay whatever. There was silence on the line. Send me everything you have, he said. The next morning Ryan was alert. Groggy but stable. I went in for rounds, expecting resistance. Instead, he looked at me with glassy eyes. I'm sorry, he said softly. Blink. For what? For what I did to you. For the court. For Nora. For all of it. I crossed my arms. Took you a decade to say that. I deserved worse. You almost got worse. He looked at me strangely. I sat beside his bed, pulled out the lab results, handed them over. He read them slowly, eyes widening. That's not from the clinic, he whispered. They said it was just vitamins. For hydration. It wasn't. He started shaking. Oh my God. I leaned forward. Ryan, did you sign that DNR yourself? He shook his head. What DNR? There it was. It stood. You almost died. And someone made sure no one would stop it. Whoever gave you those drugs wanted to make it look like a reaction. And they wanted to make sure no one brought you back. But why? I didn't answer. Because in that moment, I knew he already suspected. Later that day, Tom called me back. Your instincts were right, he said. Nora's been siphoning money from Ryan's accounts for over a year. She booked the healing retreat under an alias. That clinic, front for a black market operation. A few of their clients have not returned. Felt a chill. Do you have proof? Oh, I have more than that. I got surveillance photos, financial records, and Isabel. Yeah, she's been in touch with a man named Julio Rivas, known in underground circles. Last seen crossing back into Texas. Right after Ryan was admitted. Hung up. There was no doubt now. She tried to kill him. And she would have gotten away with it. If I hadn't been there. If I hadn't saved him. If I hadn't still been listed as his next of kin. But now the question was no longer whether Ryan would survive. It was whether she would. 'Cause I was going to court. Not just as a doctor. Not just as a witness. But as the woman Ryan once destroyed. Who now held the truth that could destroy her. 2 weeks later, Ryan was discharged under strict observation. He'd survived, but he'd never be the same. The man who once stood tall in court to strip me of everything now leaned on a cane and flinched at sudden sounds. He had permanent nerve damage from the toxins, tremors in his hands, and short-term memory loss that left him forgetting the end of his own sentences. But one thing he remembered clearly was what Nora tried to do. When the evidence came in, it was overwhelming. Tom's investigation turned up hotel camera footage of Nora meeting with Julio Rivas, the same man linked to disappearances in Tulum. Wire transfers, communications, even a burner phone number saved in Nora's email draft folder that matched Julio's. But the most damning piece, the original DNR, unaltered and unsigned, buried in Ryan's encrypted email account, timestamped just 4 days before his wellness trip. Nora had printed the draft, forged his signature, and smudged it just enough to feign authenticity. And it nearly worked. The district attorney was cautious at first. There hadn't been a death. Attempted murder is a tricky charge without clear-cut intent. But with the fraud, financial abuse, and tampering of a legal medical directive, we had leverage. And Ryan, he agreed to testify. It wasn't for me. Not entirely. But I think he knew this was the only way to make peace with what he'd done to me years ago. The courtroom was packed. Local press had picked up the story after the hospital leak. Dr. Save's ex, who left her for her best friend, then helps prove wife tried to kill him. They made it sound like fiction. But every word was true. I took the stand first. As I sat beneath the sterile lights and looked out at the jury, I was no longer the woman Ryan had broken. I was Dr. Isabel Luna, an expert witness, survivor, and someone who knew exactly how close evil could sit beside you, dressed as love. I detailed the toxicology, the DNR discrepancies, timeline, my designation as medical proxy, Nora's unusual urgency to cease treatment. Then I paused, and I looked directly at Nora, sitting at the defense table, stone-faced. There was a moment, I said, voice steady, when I had the power to stop treatment, to walk away, to let him die. No one would have known the DNR was fake. But I did what I took an oath to do. I saved his life. And now we're all here. Because someone else tried to take it. Then it was Ryan's turn. He walked slowly to the stand, assisted by a bailiff. He looked older, smaller. But his voice, when it came, was clear. I used to think power was control, he said to the courtroom. That winning meant having the last word. The last asset. The last laugh. He paused, looked at me. But the real power, that was hers. She had every reason to walk away, to let me die. And she didn't. She saved me. Then turned around and helped bring the truth to light. He turned to Nora. You tried to end me. Isabel brought me back. The courtroom was silent. Then the prosecutor played a final piece of audio evidence. A voicemail Nora left, accidentally, on her sister's phone. She was drunk, rambling, laughing. If Ryan doesn't come back, it's fate, right? I mean, it's Tulum. Stuff happens. That life insurance payout would really help the new condo. There was no emotion in her voice, just convenience. The verdict came in 2 hours later. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud, falsification of medical records, and attempted voluntary manslaughter. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. No tears, no appeal, just silence. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. One reporter asked me, Dr. Luna, after everything, do you regret saving him? Smiled. No, I said. Because justice isn't revenge. It's doing what's right, even when it hurts. Then I walked away. 2 months later I was back in the OR. Same hospital, same rhythm. But something was different. Ryan sent me a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside it read, You gave me back more than my life, Isabel. You gave me a reason to face it. I'm sorry I never knew what kind of woman you really were. But I'm glad the world does now. I didn't write back. I just folded it and placed it in a drawer with my surgical gloves. Reminder. Of the day I proved that you can survive betrayal, succeed without revenge, and still win, by staying exactly who you are. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.